listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast, the most listened to daily Miami Dolphins podcast on the internet.
Miami's got the Dolphins, the greatest of all.
Come on, Dolphins fans. Time to fins up.
We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl. Cause we're the Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one.
Hello, Dolphins out there. Good evening. Happy Tuesday to you. Jason Sarney here. I am joined with my co-host, Marisa Marino. How's your week going, Marisa?
It is going okay, Jason. Not great, not bad. It's going okay.
I'll tell you what, the best thing to do to cheer yourself up, go to Caneswear. Caneswear, the place to go for officially licensed apparel for the Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, the Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, and all professional and college teams in South Florida. Looking for that latest jersey, a birthday gift, or the newest hat to hit the market of your favorite South Florida team? Check out Caneswear for their overwhelming selection of sports apparel. Located at 2655 South University Drive in Davie, Florida, Caneswear has it all. Not in South Florida like myself, like Marisa. No worries. Visit Caneswear.com to shop their inventory from the comfort of your own home. They'll ship it right to you. International fans as well. Caneswear.com is a spot that Miami fans shop. That's Caneswear.com. Caneswear.com. Definitely pick up a little spot of sub while you're there, too. Just a little insider tip for those travelers that don't necessarily know all the eats in Davie. La Spot is a phenomenal sandwich spot. But before we talk Dolphins, you got to at least go back a little bit to Thursday night. They did not handle their business against the Buffalo Bills, of course. The injury to Tua Tagovailoa, he has now hit the IR officially. Tyler Snoop Huntley is now signed from the Baltimore Ravens practice squad. Just take us back a little bit, Marisa. Tell us what your thoughts about that game real quick, about the Tua situation, and then we'll move on to week 3.
Yeah, Jason, I mean, that game had everything you didn't want in a game all bundled up into one. My only the only light in that game for me truly was Devon Achane. I mean, he showed up and had a stellar performance, and I felt like he was just ready to go, had grit, had the passion, had all of it. Beyond that, I mean, everything else was a hard pill to swallow. As you talked about the concussion of Tua Tagovailoa, last thing you want to see from your quarterback who has suffered multiple concussions in the past. Praying for him and praying for his family and this next journey that they have moving forward. But from top to bottom, Jason, there are so many things that I saw that just need to be addressed with this Seahawks game. And I know we'll get into that, but for me, I mean, you can start off with the fact that Waddle and Hill combined for a total of 65 yards. And I think a big part of that was because of our O-line. I mean, Teron Armstead went out with an injury. Robert Jones out with an injury. That O-line couldn't protect Tua to save their lives. And that caused a major, major problem. We're also out here throwing to guys like Robbie Chosen, who just got dropped from the practice squad today, and Grant DuBose, and they're not on the same page of this timed offense where you need to be at your marker when you need to be there. So, that was hard. Mike McDaniel, to me, I said it on Twitter, but to me, this was his worst performance as a head coach. I felt like there were questionable play calls. I felt like the play calls that he did call, I was calling them from my couch, Jason. I knew what he was going to call before he was going to call it. And so it doesn't bode well for how the other team is going to handle it, because they probably know what he's going to do going into that snap. So, I didn't see, we talked last week about the passion and the grit and how this team came back from a deficit and they beat the Jags. And they did it because they just had a kind of a fire in their belly, and how the defense, had a shutout of the Jags in the second half, and how the team made adjustments. I didn't see any of that this week. Like, I just felt like, what's going on? I mean, where is the heart? These Bills players came to play. So, I mean, we don't want to harp on it too much because I'm sure everyone's tired of talking about the Bills game ad nauseum, but there is a lot to be improved upon going into week 3 here against the Seahawks.
Well said. I think you covered it extremely well. I'm not going to go and add more to it. A lot of people, us being out of towners, I'm sure a lot of folks where you're from might not necessarily share the Dolphin fandom, but I'm sure they're curious. Here in Philly, everyone's like, "Oh, sorry, man. Sorry about Tua. Are you upset? Are you upset?" I'm not upset as I'm disappointed. I thought it was a disappointing outing. Of course, the Tua scenario aside, that's a whole other issue. But overall, it was a disappointing outing. You mentioned the Mike McDaniel play calling. It's one thing to, do a thing to have the other side know it, but sometimes there are players that could just get those yards no matter what. An offensive line is good enough that they can just push the pile ahead just enough. Neither cases are meshing in that short yardage situation, even when you know it's coming. The first time with Alec Ingold, it was great. And then the second time, it's like, well, this is what they're going to do, and we're going to stop them because our front is better than your front, Buffalo says to Miami. So let's move on. Let's turn the page. And, we're going to call a little audible. Last couple of shows, Marisa, you were kind of throwing out little, tidbits and asking for my analysis, but we're going to flip that script, change the narrative, so to speak, and I'm going to allow you to give your expert analysis on the Seahawks offense first. They have their own duo of receivers in DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They also have a tight end in Noah Fant who could do some damage. Geno Smith, a quarterback, reclamation project going to the Seahawks. So what are your thoughts about the Seattle offense and what the Dolphins defense has to do to stop them?
Yeah, so the Seattle Seahawks, under Geno Smith, their offense, for me, last week anyways, in watching tape, they did a great job. Their run game was not good. They had Zach Charbonnet had 14 carries for 38 yards. Their offensive line could not run block to save their lives. So I'm really hoping we can expose that weakness. But 2 of their wide receivers, and this is the first time this has happened for the Seahawks, had 100+ yards receiving against the Patriots. And that was Jackson Smith-Njigba, second year out of Ohio State. And he had his biggest game ever with 117 yards. And then DK Metcalf set a team high of 129 yards. So their run game wasn't going well. And they said, let me put the ball in the hands of Geno Smith and see what happens. And he was able to produce. So Tyler Lockett didn't get super involved in this game, but either way, Geno Smith was able to get the ball, and he would have had more. He ended up passing for 327 yards. He would have had more, but he had 4 or 5 different balls dropped by receivers. So I think the thing here is going to be, if a weakness for them is their run blocking, is to A, expose that weakness, but also B, their offense clearly is relying on this pass game. So what does that look like for this Miami defense? How can we get those guys to get to Geno Smith and to get him uncomfortable, to put a little bit of pressure on him in that pocket to possibly make some bad reads, some bad throws? I think too, one interesting thing is Mike McDonald, who is now the coach for the Seahawks, used to be the defensive coordinator for the Ravens. So him and Anthony Weaver are very, very familiar with each other. And this is the first time ever that a Seattle Seahawks head coach has gone into his tenure with a 2-0 record. So I know he's going to be chomping at the bit to continue that. So our defense just needs to show up against this offense and put some pressure on them. And I'm interested to see what our secondary looks like, because I felt like last week we're going to get into the defense, but wasn't great.
Great analysis. They had their running back, Kenneth Walker, the third, who was injured, was inactive last week. You mentioned Zach Charbonnet. Now, Geno Smith is actually, one of the lowest rated quarterbacks in the league when blitzed so far this year. So he's not throwing well when applying pressure. So that Anthony Weaver defense hopefully can bring some of that pressure. You have your Calais Campbells, your Zach Sealers on the defensive line, and of course you have Jaylen Phillips from the edge and Chop Robinson, who could hopefully apply that pressure. Do you see Geno handling that potential pressure? Do you see a secondary receiver like Jackson Smith-Njigba really hurting the Dolphins? Who's the guy to circle? Is it Metcalf? Is it Charbonnet? Is it another receiver? Is it Fant? Who are you worried about the most?
I think for me it would be DK Metcalf. He would be the one to pay attention to. I think the thing is between them having, they have a couple different guys and some of them can be used as decoys, which for them, bodes well for them. So for me, I'd probably say DK Metcalf. I mean, he's a household name. He's just coming off of that, team high of 129 yards. Now, granted, we have to consider the fact that this is against the Patriots and the game before that was against the Broncos. So it's not like we're talking about these, high caliber teams, but at the end of the day, like we said last season about the Dolphins when they would win a game, a win is a win, right? So for me, it's going to be making sure to really, really paying attention to these wide receivers and sticking on them like absolute glue to try to get this thing with what we are about to go into with Skylar Thompson at the helm. So
this is going to be like I don't care if the Seahawks are good, bad, indifferent. Any team that travels to Seattle is going to face that 12th man, the noise. It is one of the loudest and audibly difficult places to play, let alone the fact that, Marisa jumped out for a quick second, but we're going to bring her right back. There she is. All right, a little technical difficulties live potting, but maybe it was the reverberation of the Marshawn Lynch run from a few years ago. Maybe once we started talking about the 12th man, it knocked our connection out. Sorry, but it is the longest flight in the lower 48 states, so obviously not including your Alaskas and your Hawaii. Dolphins have a long flight, long flight, 2,700 miles to go. They're coming off of this awful loss, both score and, of course, starting quarterback. We'll jump into that more with Tua. But, what is the main factor in stopping this Seattle Seahawks offense? If, of course, you have a banged up or not playing Walker, Charbonnet, what would be the actual silencer of this crowd potentially from a Dolphins defensive side?
From the defensive side, I think it's just going to be, putting the pressure on Geno Smith. I mean, he's not the most, complete and mobile quarterback. I mean, he has his moments for sure, but I think making sure we put the pressure on him. I haven't heard, love him, but haven't heard Sealer's name called a lot. David Long, I've been hearing his name called the past 2 games. I mean, David Long has been having a heck of a performance. But, Calais Campbell, again, we saw him with that first sack in the first defensive drive of the game against the Jags. But I think really getting pressure on Geno Smith, because if that's what they're comfortable with, especially after this last game and their run game doesn't work, if you can also shut down that pass game, well, then what do they have left? I mean, they're starting to scratch their head and having to figure out, what do we do and how do we go against this Dolphins defense? So a lot of talent on this Miami's defense, and I'm ready to see these guys step it up. And yes, blitz Geno. I can roll with that. Blitz Geno.
Frederick, good comment. And the stat is from a blitz passing situation so far this year, Geno Smith and the Seahawks are ranked 30th in the league. His passing rating when blitzed, 36.55. The NFL average when blitzed is 83.94. So blitz, 1,000%. Now, Skylar Thompson is essentially given the reins, until he might lose them, of this offense. And that's just being completely honest of what we've seen from Skylar in his limited sample size, just a couple of starts, 1-1, but of the other games that he's shown film and getting in, nothing's been world beating. I don't think that he has this offense completely under his purview and grasp. He didn't throw a pass last year, of course. He was the third stringer, but he won the backup job over Mike White this offseason. Now it is his time to hopefully shine, and he doesn't get the easiest trip at all in his first start of this particular season. Now, the Seahawks on defense, they have a very good secondary. They got guys who've been to the Pro Bowl. Julian Love. They brought in, a couple of a rookie cornerback, Witherspoon, I believe, last year made the Pro Bowl. So in his second year, let's see if he can defend either Tyreek or Waddle. But you also have Jerome Baker, that is now ex-Dolphin, current Seahawk. You have Jordan Brooks, ex-Seahawk, current Dolphin. So that's a fun little flip. What does Skylar Thompson and the Dolphins offense have to do to keep that crowd quiet and go in there and hopefully get a win?
Yeah, so Skylar Thompson, I think, first of all, we just need to have him go in there with, cool, calm, and collected, understanding that he has the support of his teammates and, Dolphins Nation behind him. And I think, making sure we have a really great balance of the throw to the run and maybe even relying a little bit heavier on our run game, especially sent with Devon Achane, Jeff Wilson Jr. I'm not sure of Raheem Mostert's status, but with him, the defense of the Seahawks last week gave up 185 rushing yards to the Pats. So could that be the silver lining for us with Skylar Thompson at his first official start of the season? Maybe that is the case. So for me, I'm going to look for, Skylar Thompson. He's not a Tua. And I think we need to, first of all, remember that backups are backups for a reason, right? So your expectations, although you can have expectations because he's a quarterback in the NFL, he's not your starting quarterback. Now, I think my biggest concern with Skylar starting in this game is just the fact of this O-line and just kind of the numbers that they're putting up as far as like their gradings, their rankings of this O-line. And that gives me pause for concern because he's not Tua. He doesn't get the ball out in 2.3 seconds. And so what does this offense now look like with Skylar Thompson at the helm? And I think that's something they're really going to have to figure out. I'm hoping that him and Aaron Brewer are really practicing their symmetry and their snaps together, making sure that all of that is going seamlessly. But again, I think when you have the Pats running for 185 yards against the Seattle Seahawks team, and they don't have a track team for their running game, we allow our run game to really supplant us while Skylar Thompson gets his feet wet in this first game.
I have absolutely no problem with 25 plus collective runs. I hope you're right. I'm with that. I think that someone said it in, Johnny O. Skylar just needs to play within himself. Run, run, run. I like that. The Seattle Seahawks defense, not particularly world beaters. Their average the last two games, 142 yards on the ground, way below NFL average. They're ranked about 21st in the league against the run. And, you have a Devon Achane. You have a Jaylen Wright, who obviously didn't play fantastic in his debut. But you have a guy like an Achane who, forget about rushing attempts, put the ball in his hand. What he has done in just 13 games, I mean, there's only 3 guys who have scored more touchdowns in their first 13 games, and they're all huge names, Hall of Fame type of play. Eric Dickerson, who has the most in that span, and that's one of the greatest running backs of all time. And you're also looking at a guy who has accomplished something in Achane where the last person to do so in the first 2 games of an NFL season in rushing yards and receiving yards, he's got 120 rushing, 145 receiving. Only person who's done that last is Christian McCaffrey about 3-4 years ago. I believe it was 2021, maybe. So Achane, if he could sustain this, per touch yardage, because it's not just rushing, it's not just receiving, you got to put the ball in his hands, and you got to hope that Raheem Mostert could do what he was brought in here to do and gain those yards from like the 20 to the 20. I really feel that that's where either Mostert or Wright needs to shine with rushing, extending drives. Achane, I don't care. Give him the ball 20 times, 25 times, but mix it up with, I don't want to see 22 carries from him. I would like to see more reception yards and spread that rushing out because we got to sustain Achane. But what are your thoughts about the other people in that backfield and some other offensive players?
Well, just real quick, I wanted to comment on that. I mean, I think you hit 100% the nail on the head. Against that game against the Jags, Achane did have 77 reception yards. So right now, we know we just dropped Robbie Chosen, didn't do anything anyways. Grant Dubose, I'm hoping we're not having to get him involved. With OBJ out, Braxton Berrios, we haven't seen a ton from him. Who also are we going to distribute that ball to? And I think if Raheem Mostert is healthy, allowing Achane to be that wide receiver 3, if he's someone that can catch the ball, which we've not had the best time doing these past few weeks. So absolutely agree with you on that front for sure.
14 of 14 Tua targeting Achane so far this year. He's got 7 targets, 7 catches in each game. So put the ball in his hands. Now, of course, offense really needs to be predicated on solid offensive line play, especially on the road. We alluded to it. There's definitely nervousness about this offensive line. You got Teron Armstead with the shoulder. So are you looking at journeyman Kendall Lamb, or is Patrick Paul ready? We're probably going to see Lamb if last week was any indication. Are your thoughts what are your thoughts on Patrick Paul versus Lamb? Who do you want to see? Are you happy with the scenario here? What are your thoughts on left tackle?
So I think it's going to be Kendall Lamb. I mean, I think I think that's what's going to happen. And Kendall Lamb's, his numbers last week, I mean, it wasn't bad when he went into the game. He did better than I thought he was going to do. So I anticipate it to be Kendall Lamb. Now, I don't know that, Teron Armstead is going to be fully out for this game. Has that been confirmed or not?
It has not. At this point, the Wednesday report, we're here on Tuesday, so we don't know that. But I would be at this point shocked if Armstead's going to play after being in and out or whatever, So this is something to track, but at this moment, nothing definitive. Right now.
I would say Kendall Lamb for this, and maybe if they want to, I would say Kendall Lamb. It would be the person that I would put in right now, and Patrick Paul, continue to. Keep working, keep practicing with the guys and see what happens out there. I think, the one thing about this defense, man, is this Seattle defense. I mean, they're not like a top caliber defense, but they did have a huge trade pickup in the offseason where they picked up Leonard Williams from the Giants. I mean, major get, Pro Bowler. He had a heck of a game last week. And last week, against Geno Smith, the Seattle Seahawks defense had 3 sacks and 8 pressures on the quarterback. So, I wish I had somebody on this offensive line who I could say, wow, that's going to be the guy that's going to step up. If you're looking at numbers purely, Liam Eichenberg had the best game last week, which is
that's something. That's something. But these grades, 1 week they're graded phenomenally. The next week they're graded, I joked around. It's like my calculus teacher grading my 10th grade calculus test. Oh God, disgusting. You can't do anything when you're playing that kind of poorly. But, outside, I saw someone, I want to give credit where credit is due. Gregory. Yeah. Okay. Ingold and the tight ends. Let's talk about their importance. Ingold, I think his value is going to be picking up that short yardage. He was 3 of 3. And then that other second time that they ran 3rd and 1 up the middle, he was stuffed. Or it might have been 4th and 1. But, he was starting to have that Lusaka polite in him where McDaniel was giving him the ball on 3rd and 1 situations and he was converting. Now people are going to probably see it coming. What I want to look for, and I'm curious to hear your analysis, one part of Skylar Thompson's game that I happen to really enjoy watching is his play action, how he play fakes and how he just comes out of a fake handoff, rolls around, and he does that very crisp, I'll say. So if I'm drawing a play in my head, I see maybe that happening, little play action pass, kind of roll out, have a tight end just drag across the middle. Who is that going to be? Is it going to be Durham Smythe? Is it going to be Jonnu Smith? Is it going to be Julian Hill? Are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing? Do you want the tight ends to be involved in the passing game?
100%. And I think that's part of that's an issue for me. I feel like I was so excited going into this season because I thought we were going to revamp this offense just a little bit to incorporate a tight end more than we have in the past. As you've talked about, we were the only team last year with a tight end that did not have a touchdown. So when we got Jonnu Smith, I said, okay, I mean, that's another guy on the field that they're having to pay attention to. And I've not seen much. And so I think some of this, though, and people in the comments are hitting this on the head, is going to be about Mike McDaniel and what play calls he draws up for this team. I would rather see a play call drawn up for Jonnu Smith, maybe like a 9-yard, 10-yard pass. They don't have to all be these like bombs to just move the sticks, as opposed to these passes that are created for guys that are wide receivers on the practice squad that we just picked up. And so Mike McDaniel, I think, is going to be the key to tying this whole thing in a bow for me. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how he adjusts to Skylar Thompson being on the field, what kind of play calls he's created. I mean, they said he's an offensive-minded genius, and I'm not trying to sound negative, but if that is the case, this is the game to show that, because this is where your adjustments need to happen.
That's a great point, because what the genius of Mike McDaniel, I think, comes out in nuance, right? Like if you have Tua, of course, we won't have that for this game or a couple of weeks, but with Tua, the way that there were, fakes or play actions or just little tiny ways of ball faking, turning the way he would toss it or do one of those sweeps. There's a lot of genius there. Where I want the genius is to be areas of the field, time, situational, down areas where it's the right play at the right time in the right area. Like all those things need to actually kind of sing in harmony. He's not done it, but he needs to do it consistently. Case in point with Jonnu Smith, 2 targets week 1, spike that to 7 week 2. Obviously different game results, but you got a guy like Smith, you got a guy like Julian Hill, who I think ran a decent route but missed a touchdown on a seam route against the Bills. That should have been Jonnu Smith. Like that. I mean, that's what I'm saying situationally. Like if you're going to, all due respect to Julian Hill, I think he plays a great game when he is within his game of blocking and helping that area. I would love him to get more involved if able in the passing game, but that was a Jonnu Smith route. You know what I mean? So to me, it's personnel, it's play calling in the right areas. And I think that he could do it. And another thing that is very difficult with Mike McDaniel are these road scenarios, challenges, timeout maintenance, burning timeouts when you can't afford any timeout burn in the second half. He called 2 of them. One of them maybe I think you had to, but you got to be better as a head coach with the timeouts and the challenges.
Clock management, areas. Can that be one that we address? Because
1,000%. Go for it.
Burned my biscuits.
Turn it on full 450. Flame on. Go for it.
The clock management. Some people said, the last, going into the half, you have over 3 minutes, all 3 timeouts. You're trying to go down the field and score a touchdown because the Bills are getting the ball back. You have your 2-minute warning. So essentially you have 4 timeouts. We ended up having to go for a field goal on 3rd down because we only had 8 seconds left. And some people said, oh, well, that's because he didn't want to leave any time for the Bills. Okay, I understand that, but leave enough time for yourself. The point was to put 7. When you're playing against the Bills and you're down like that, field goals are not going to win you ball games. And we saw that happen. And so I don't know if Mike McDaniel, he seemed okay just going in with a field goal. Like he seemed like that was what he was fine with. Maybe he was just ready to get the first half over with and get into his locker room. But that clock management really, really, like I said, burnt my biscuits. So there's a saying for you.
I like it. And there's intangibles. And that is a huge intangible. Yards are great. Time of possession is great, but managing the clock, extending drives. Look, I love a quick hit drive more than anybody, but let me tell you something. 0 quick strike drives given up by the Seattle Seahawks defense so far this year. And one more thing I got to tell you, this is scary. This scares the bejesus.
Come on, Sarney,
this scares the bejesus out of me. 50% of the drives that they faced this year, 3 and out, leads the NFL. So the layman term, they are the best defense so far of telling a defense you have 3 shots and we're saying, nope, ball back.
Yeah.
Nobody better so far. So as Michael Oliva says, we're going to make a t-shirt, burnt your biscuits, and we'll obviously make sure that we get the appropriate commissions going. But yeah, that's the scariest stat right now is the third 3-and-out scenario on how good the Seahawks are at that so far.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be, this is going to be, I mean, this is just going to be so interesting. So many people too, and I feel like we have to address this, Jason. Everybody in the chats is talking about Tyler Snoop Huntley and what that looks like for this team. And not to, I want to put it out there that everybody's talking about him. Everybody's talking about him.
I mean, look, the best thing I like about him is the freelance potential. It's the ability to say, all right, can't see it, tuck it, go. And not like a quarterback who shouldn't be doing that. He could pick up the yards. He can get out when he needs to, but he could extend the play. He could do, not calling him Lamar Jackson by any stretch of the imagination, but if there was a Lamar Jackson light who can kind of go, maybe in the pocket, maybe out, kind of go, there's going to be a block. Okay, good. And then throw across his body and pick up 7 yards after running around 47 miles. Tua is not the guy. As much as I love Tua, you don't want him freelancing. You want him throwing quickly to a spot. Huntley is a guy who can do that. I don't think we want to root to see him against the Seattle Seahawks. That would clearly mean one of two things. And I don't want to say the obvious. It would mean that Skylar's not performing or, God forbid, worse.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I've seen some people in the comments talk about drawing up plays for running for Tyler Huntley. That doesn't need to happen. You don't need to risk your quarterback getting injured by dialing up some plays for him. Like, no, he needs to settle in. He needs to get his flashcards out, and he needs to study this Miami offense because, as we know, this is not a plug-and-play offense that just any quarterback can just be thrown into and they can pick it up. So he needs to have those flashcards. He needs to be getting prepared. Do I hope that Skylar Thompson has an amazing game? Absolutely. And do I think it's possible? I think it's possible for him to have a good game. Is there a part of me that's curious what this offense looks like with a mobile quarterback who's rushed for 509 yards in the past few years when he hasn't even really been a starter, besides when Lamar Jackson was injured for a bit? Am I a little curious about that? I am, Jason. I'm not going to lie.
I'm a little curious too. And I was trying to think about, another time in the Dolphin world that we live in at this moment that is comparable, going into week 3, what's going on? What are we going to do? I know this isn't the best example, but I am extremely curious to see maybe some differentiation, maybe something that we've never seen before, maybe something wild. Now, when I say wild, I'm not saying wildcat, but in 2008, it was week 3. The Dolphins were 0-2. They took a road trip to New England, and they had an idea. And the idea was a wildcat offense. Now, again, I'm not saying put Jaylen Wright back at the wildcat and have Devon Achane. I'm not saying do that. Wouldn't make me mad. But to do something different, to have someone say, what the hell are these guys? This guy's a genius.
Yeah.
That's what I want. And then I want on the way back for everyone to say, what the hell are these guys bringing back? What did they do on that plane? And that's what we were talking about with the David Lee and the Dan Hennig offense that he gave to Tony Sperano back when they unleashed the Wildcat. And I don't care what you do something to make this offense purr, because I don't know if it's going to be Skylar getting 345 yards, 3 touchdowns with 158 perfect passer rating. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah. Annexation of Puerto Rico. I love it.
That is fantastic. You know what we should do? Call the annexation of Puerto Rico and then burnt the biscuits of the Seahawks, and then we got a dual phrase. Mike, you're gonna be very busy in the patent office in Dolphins Talk tonight.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, I think this is going to show us a lot and see. I think that coming out of this game, we're going to have some questions answered because Skylar Thompson, if he's able to do well, will be our quarterback until Tua possibly comes back, which is until week 8 against the Cardinals. And if you look at the upcoming schedule, it's not like it's the most difficult schedule going into these next 4 weeks. I think a lot of these games and these teams are very winnable. So there is going to be a lot dependent on what we see from Skylar Thompson to whether or not I'm going to hit the panic mode for the next several weeks.
I always hate the panic button and doing it. Like, is your hand on the switch? Did you break the glass just yet? But you make a good point. If Skylar could get out of there, well, I don't care. It doesn't need to be a pretty win. None of these have to be pretty. Let me just put it out there right now. I don't care if they win 9-7 and Jason Sanders is the offense and Skylar is 11 of 14 for 122, no touchdowns, one pick. Get a win. That's all I care about over the next month. If we see Tua back and this team is above 500, that's a win. I mean, and that's unfortunately where we're at, because you look at the games ahead and they are winnable. And there's a bye week nuzzled right in there. And then I think one more game where he would probably be under that IR, the Colt game, and then maybe he'll be eligible to play back. But a quarterback's got to go in there and not be sub 500. So whatever the case may be, Skylar Thompson has a large task against mediocre competition. And that should translate into a worst case 500.
Exactly. And I mean, if the case is that Tua really is coming back and he really is coming back week 8 against the Cardinals, I think there's a couple things that kind of are in our favor. One of them being the fact that we do have a schedule coming up the next 4 weeks that isn't that difficult based on what we've seen in a 2-week sample size. Things are going to obviously change, but what we've seen so far. But I think the other side of that is going to be the fact that in the AFC, we have a lot of teams that we would probably expect that are vying for that wild card spot or those wild card spots that are not doing well. I mean, you did not have this on my bingo card, Jason, an 0-2 Bengals. You have an 0-2 Ravens team. You have an 0-2 Jags team. So that does help a little bit in quelling the nerves of what can we get out of these next 4 weeks? What can we scratch by with till we get Tua back to get back into business?
I have no problem rooting for other teams to lose week like 14, 15. But it's nice to see, the Colts lost a game they probably should have won, even though it's on the road. That's a team that's going to be wild cardy. You got the Titans, the Jaguars, the Broncos, the Ravens, the Colts. A lot of 0-2 teams that shouldn't be. At least half of those 0-2 teams, one of them should have a win, I believe. So the Dolphins are getting a little bit of a break that they're going through this. They got the loss, but other teams are losing. They have a softer schedule in these next 3 or 4 games than clearly they will in the later parts of the year when it gets a little tougher. So this is a huge opportunity for Skylar Thompson. And you know what? The veterans are going to have to step up, whether it's offensive line, whether it's a running back, whether it's Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, whether it's Durham Smythe. Durham Smythe has not had a great start to the year at all. And he's a guy that last year really didn't do much wrong, just wasn't featured a lot. He just never really made a mistake. Now he's got like 3 drops to start the year. So the veterans have to play up to form, but frankly, to pick up a kid like Skylar Thompson, players are going to have to really play above their capabilities. And we're going to have to see fantastic performances, I think, from an Achane, from a Hill, and a Waddle for this team to go up into Seattle and come home with a win. We got to touch on special teams a little bit, unless you have anything else on the offense to get through.
No, I think that's just the one other thing I would say is, I mean, I know people bring up the Skylar Thompson against the Bills in the snow in the playoffs. And people are like, oh, that's so long ago, but some people still bring it up. I think the point of bringing that up is to just let people know that Skylar Thompson has dealt with high pressure games before. He's dealt with going up to Buffalo, try to win this team a playoff, and got anything near close to it. So I think what that just shows is that he is capable of showing up in a game, and especially in this situation where he probably feels a lot of pressure on him to carry this team on his back. So hopefully that's something that he's harvested and can bring that into this game.
We'll touch a little bit on special teams, but one other guy that I think is defensive, that is going back into a familiar environment, Calais Campbell is very much used to in his long career playing at and against the Seahawks. Most sacks of his career on any team that he has against is against those Seattle Seahawks. So I'm sure he's going to be chomping at the bit for that matchup as well. And, you know, you got a special teams unit with Jason Sanders and Jake Bailey who are doing everything you can ask of them at the moment. You know, do you think that
Bailey?
Hey,
I mean, hey, Jake.
I got another stat that I don't want to say right yet, but it's a little surprise. He's fifth. He crept into fifth all time with the Dolphins in net punting yard average. So Jake Bailey is moving up the ladder.
We never doubted him.
No one ever doubted him.
Never doubted him.
It's not like anybody was calling and clamoring for a guy off the street to take this. I mean, no one at all.
Yeah. People are so dramatic.
I digress.
Wasn't Dolphins talk.
No, Dolphins talk had nothing to do with it. We were so innocent. This has nothing to do with us. Okay, before we go completely off the rails here, we're going to ask for a score. I'm going to ask for a score. I know it's early. Do you have one? Does someone in the chat have one? What are we thinking?
Golly.
It's early.
I probably should have came because we always do predictions in this game. I mean, not in this game, in this show. I am going to go and I'm going to say 16. Dolphins 16. No. I don't know, Jason. Maybe like 21 to 16 or something.
I like it. You know what?
It's going to be a high-scoring game.
I agree with you. I'm going to go with the under, and I'm going to, it's our show. You can do whatever you want. I'll do whatever I want. I'm not going to give a score, but I'm going to say it's going to be a scoreagami. It's going to be an under and a weird score. It is going to be a baseball AAA affiliate club score. It's going to be some oddity. But I'm going to have the Dolphins have one or two more numbers. Jason Sanders, again, is going to win it. Every game, I'm going to have Jason Sanders winning until I have to score it otherwise.
What was the game last year that the Dolphins had a scoreagami? Do you remember?
Was it the Dallas game?
Was it Dallas?
Because he had 5 field goals. It might have been the Dallas game.
Yeah. That'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, Jason Sanders, weird because you can count on him to make the clutch kicks to win the games, but you can't. You have to hold your breath on the 35-yard field goals to, give us a few points in game. Don't know what that's about, but
he's Steph Curry under a minute, and he's the guy from Along Came Polly chucking baskets.
Yeah.
In the first quarter and second quarter, but he is one of the clutchest kickers in the league. So when the lights are on, as I've said, as I will continue to say until he proves not, when things are on the line, Jason Sanders is the guy to put his foot on the ball. So unless we got anything else to cover, I think we pretty much hit this one out of the park, and hopefully that the Dolphins could travel safe, come back safe, and come home with the win. Is there anything else to add?
I mean, I think that's it. I'm Central Time. It's a 3:25 game, so I'll be eagerly awaiting, and just seeing a lot of teams. I don't know if I said this earlier in the show, but I saw a lot of teams getting to watch NFL Red Zone on Sunday since we weren't playing that have far less of the talent that the Miami Dolphins does on their team, and they look far superior to us. So this team has, it has the studs, it has what it needs to be successful. We need all the pieces to kind of come together, and that's what I'm waiting for to happen, for it to kind of click. So,
well, they have a lot of potential. They got a ton of talent. The Skylar is the limit if we could be cheesy with our, whatever. But anyway, we got a good matchup week 3. Hopefully the Dolphins could turn it into a 2-1 record. Marisa, I know you're busy with a lot of things football. Are there any interviews? You got anything else on the docket coming up?
No, I did try to get Emmanuel Acho to come on the show, and he responded yesterday on social, and I requoted it that he said he respects me reaching out and will make it happen. So we're gonna hold him to that, you guys. We need to have him break down some games on air. But other than that, I'll be posting later tonight just a 5-minute pregame breakdown. But in very condensed form. For people online, and you can just find me at mustbemarissa87, Marissa with 1 S.
Love it. Continue your great work. Thank you for everyone for watching. Check us all out, the whole crew at DolphinsTalk.com. Thanks to our sponsors for Caneswear. And for Marissa, I'm Jason. Fins up, everybody. Have a great night.